What if I told you that Amazon was invented in 1872? Not by Jeff Bezos, not in a garage in Seattle, but by a traveling salesman in Chicago with $1,600 and an idea so far ahead of its time that it would take the world another 120 years to catch up. The company he built became one of the most powerful retail empires in American history. It fed families during the Depression. It created one of the most beloved characters in the history of Christmas. And then, piece by piece, through a series of decisions so bad and so calculated that they almost defy belief, it was destroyed. Not by Amazon, not by Walmart, not by the internet. It was destroyed from the inside, twice, by the very people who were supposed to protect it. This is the full story of Montgomery Ward. And by the end of this video, you are going to see a company you thought you knew in a completely different light. Let me take you back to 1872. The United States was still mostly a farming nation. And if you were a farmer in rural America in those years, you were getting squeezed from every direction. Commodity prices, meaning what farmers actually got paid for their crops, were collapsing because new farmland in Argentina and Canada was flooding the global market. Railroad companies were charging you whatever they wanted to move your harvest. And when you needed to buy goods for your family, you had exactly one option: the local general store. That store charged you whatever it felt like charging because you had nowhere else to go, and the owner knew it. Farmers were trapped, and every merchant within 50 miles understood that perfectly. Aaron Montgomery Ward had spent years on the road as a traveling dry goods salesman. He had seen this system up close, and he understood exactly how broken it was. So in August of 1872, operating from a tiny office in Chicago with 2 employees and $1,600 in capital, he launched something nobody had ever tried before: a direct-to-consumer mail-order business that cut out every middleman in the chain and sold goods directly to the people who needed them at wholesale prices. His first catalog was a single sheet of paper, 8 by 12 inches, with 163 items and a set of ordering instructions he wrote himself. But the idea was not just bold. It was backed by a guarantee that changed everything. Satisfaction guaranteed, or your money back. That promise sounds simple today. In 1872, it was revolutionary. Farmers who had spent their entire lives being cheated by merchants who stood behind nothing suddenly had someone telling them that if it was not right, they would get every dollar returned. The trust that simple promise generated was enormous, and Ward cemented it by officially partnering with the Patrons of Husbandry, a powerful network of farmers known as the Grange, marketing himself as the original wholesale supply house for the American farmer. The growth was staggering. By 1876, that single sheet had become a catalog of 152 pages with 3,000 items. By 1883, it was 240 pages and 10,000 items. By the 1890s, the catalog was nearly 1,000 pages thick, and annual sales had hit $7 million. Rural families from Nebraska to Georgia sat down at their kitchen tables and paged through what people called the Dream Book. You could order clothing, tools, furniture, farm equipment, and medicine. And here is the detail that always stops me cold when I tell this story. At the peak of the catalog era, you could order an entire house from Montgomery Ward. A complete, prefabricated kit called a Ward Way home. It arrived by rail in over 12,000 individual pieces. Your house delivered to your door. Now, here is the Amazon parallel that I think matters more than anything else in this story. To process tens of thousands of orders every single day, Montgomery Ward built a fulfillment center in Chicago that covered 1.25 million square feet along the North Branch of the Chicago River. And the system inside that building was operating on principles that Amazon would not popularize for another 100 years. Orders arrived by mail and were immediately sorted by specialized clerks, who routed paper pick tickets through a network of pressurized pneumatic tubes to the correct warehouse floor. Stockmen retrieved the items. Belt conveyors running at 400 feet per minute moved products across the building to the packing department. The whole operation was built for one purpose: speed and accuracy at massive scale. Montgomery Ward built that infrastructure in 1908. Jeff Bezos was born in 1964. The original Amazon was running decades before his grandfather was born. And the company that ran that operation was at its core a generous one. I want you to know that before we get to what happened next. Because in 1939, Montgomery Ward gave an assignment to a 34-year-old copywriter named Robert L. May. He was struggling badly, buried in debt. His wife was dying of cancer. He spent his days writing catalog descriptions for men's dress shirts. They asked him to write a children's story to give away free in stores during Christmas. May drew from his own memories of being the small, shy kid nobody wanted around, and from weekend trips to the zoo with his daughter Barbara. He wrote a story about a reindeer with a red nose that nobody believed in. Montgomery Ward printed 2,400,000 copies in 1939 alone, and gave every single one away for free. When Rudolph became one of the most valuable characters in American pop culture, the board of directors gave the copyright directly to May. A struggling, widowed copywriter walked away owning Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer outright. May said he lived in the house that Rudolph built. That is who this company was at its peak. So powerful and so confident that they literally created a Christmas tradition the whole world still uses today. And then, almost immediately after that moment, they stopped trying. One man decided to stop building, stop growing, stop competing. And he nearly took the whole thing down before the financial engineers even got their hands on it. His name was Sewell Avery. He took over as chairman and chief executive in 1931. And the problem with Sewell Avery was that the Great Depression had broken something in him that never healed. He had watched the economy collapse, and he was not going to let it happen to him again. So he decided that the safest strategy was to hoard cash and wait. The post-war boom was coming. The GI Bill was pumping money into millions of young families. The baby boom was creating the largest consumer generation in American history. Suburbs were being built at a pace that had never been seen before, and every one of those new suburban families needed appliances, tools, clothing, and furniture. The department store that got into those new neighborhoods first would dominate the next 50 years of American retail. Sewell Avery did not build a single new store. He refused to paint the existing ones. He reportedly would not even authorize the purchase of paint to freshen up locations that were visibly deteriorating. His strategy was to sit on cash and wait for the inevitable depression that he was absolutely certain was coming. By 1954, Montgomery Ward was holding $285 million in cash and securities, and they had barely built anything. Look, I have studied a lot of bad corporate decisions researching this channel, but what gets me about Avery is not that he was afraid. Fear made sense after what he lived through. What gets me is that he had everything he needed to win and chose paralysis anyway. While his competitors were building the future, he was guarding the past. Here is what makes this particular crime so maddening to me. A former Montgomery Ward executive named Robert E. Wood had left the company years earlier and gone to work at Sears. And Wood did exactly what Avery refused to do. He chased the baby boom into the suburbs. He built hundreds of massive department stores and made Sears the premier anchor tenant in the newly invented American shopping mall. By the mid-1950s, Sears operated over 700 locations across the United States and was expanding into Mexico and Canada. Montgomery Ward, sitting on its mountain of cash, had barely moved. Then it got worse. Avery's obstinance was so legendary that when the federal government ordered him to comply with a wartime labor ruling during World War II, he simply refused. President Roosevelt sent the United States Army to take control of Montgomery Ward's operations. And what happened next produced one of the most extraordinary photographs in American business history. Sewell Avery, the chairman and chief executive of one of America's great retail empires, was physically carried out of his own office by two Army soldiers. He did not walk out. He sat in his office chair, and they lifted the chair and carried him, chair and all, out the door while he stared straight ahead. He told reporters afterward that the government had been shut down by the commander-in-chief of the labor unions. He was not embarrassed. He was defiant. That stubbornness cost the company something it could never get back. The suburban real estate that Sears was locking up throughout the 1950s was gone forever. You cannot go back and get the best corner of a mall that someone else built 20 years ago. By the time Avery was finally forced out in 1955, the damage was structural and permanent. The following management teams tried everything. They cut the supplier network in half, reduced private brands, and reorganized store operations. None of it fixed the core problem. Because Montgomery Ward no longer had a clear identity, it was not premium like Macy's or Marshall Field's, and it sure was not a deep discounter with the pricing muscle of the emerging Walmart or Kmart. It was stuck somewhere in the middle, in a kind of retail no man's land where nobody could quite explain what they were going there for. The company drifted from owner to owner. It merged with a paper company in 1968. It was purchased by Mobil Oil in 1974. By the late 1980s, one of the greatest retail innovators in American history was just an underperforming subsidiary of an oil company. And that is when the second and final destruction began. In 1988, a group of Montgomery Ward executives orchestrated a leveraged buyout to take the company private. The purchase price was $3.8 billion. Most of that money was borrowed. Their financing partner was General Electric Capital Corporation, GE Capital. And the moment that deal closed, Montgomery Ward stopped being a retail company and became a debt-servicing machine. Here is something I want you to understand about what this company still had left even at that late stage. Hidden inside the struggling retail stores was a financial services division called the Signature Group. It was massive. Over 5,800 employees, 26 call centers, 66 million telemarketing presentations per year, and 232 million direct mail pieces sent annually. The Signature Group ran a $4 billion credit card portfolio and sold insurance, auto club memberships, dental plans, and legal services directly to Montgomery Ward customers. It was generating enormous amounts of cash, even as the retail stores struggled. GE Capital could see all of this. As a financing partner and major owner, they had full visibility into every number inside the company. They watched the retail stores bleed. And they waited. In 1997, Montgomery Ward filed for bankruptcy protection. Starved for cash, drowning in the debt from the 1988 buyout, the retail operation could not sustain itself. And during the restructuring, GE Capital made its move. In 1999, they purchased the Signature Group from Montgomery Ward for roughly $1 billion. They took the engine, the profitable, cash-generating core that was keeping the lights on, and they left the empty retail carcass behind. Stripped of its primary revenue source, the retail operation had nothing left. GE Capital was now simultaneously the owner of what remained of Montgomery Ward and its primary secured lender, holding a $1 billion financing line. And they could see with complete certainty that the company was not going to survive. The numbers made that clear throughout the year 2000. Targets were missed quarter after quarter. The patient was flatlining. But GE Capital did not pull the plug, because they needed one more thing first. They needed Christmas. To fill the shelves for the holiday season, Montgomery Ward needed vendors to ship hundreds of millions of dollars in goods on credit. The problem was that vendors were nervous. So in the summer of 2000, GE Capital and Montgomery Ward management sent letters to suppliers claiming that GE Capital was injecting $100 million in fresh equity to keep the company alive. The letters described aggressive store remodeling plans and painted a picture of a company moving confidently into the future. They also reached out to individual vendors and offered to pay faster, in 30 days instead of 60, which gave suppliers more room under their credit limits and allowed them to ship even more goods. The message was clear. Trust us. GE Capital is behind us completely. The vendors trusted them. Jewelry companies shipped. Electronic suppliers shipped. Clothing brands and home goods manufacturers sent everything they had. Hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandise crossed the loading docks just in time for Christmas. The moment it did, that inventory legally became the collateral securing GE Capital's loan. Montgomery Ward sold it to Christmas shoppers at full retail price. The cash flowed straight to GE Capital to pay down their secured debt. And then, 3 days after Christmas, on December 28, 2000, Montgomery Ward announced it was closing forever. After 128 years in business, they waited until December 28th. Not October, not before Thanksgiving. They waited until the strongest retail week of the year was over. The registers were full and the shelves were empty. Then, they closed the doors. I want you to stay with me right here, because what happened to the workers is the part of this story that deserves to be said out loud more often than it is. 37,000 people went to work on December 27th, 2,000 not knowing it was their last day. Store managers who had given 20 and 30 years to this company, cashiers who knew their regular customers by name, stockroom workers, sales clerks, and back office staff across 30 states. On December 28th, without warning, they were gone. The executives had protected themselves during the first bankruptcy, securing a $17.6 million retention pool split among 500 senior managers. Top executives were guaranteed up to 78 weeks of severance. The frontline workers were capped at 26 weeks at best. And buried in the fine print was a clause that said that cap did not apply if the termination was caused by the shutdown of an entire location. When the entire company shut down at once, that loophole erased everything. Then the pension. Decades of retirement savings that these workers had been promised. The collapse left the pension plan severely underfunded. The Federal Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation stepped in to assume the obligations. But the PBGC has a cap. Long-term employees who had been promised retirement benefits above that cap saw their income permanently reduced. Some of them saw years of deferred compensation simply disappear. And the scale of the Montgomery Ward failure, combined with simultaneous collapses in steel and the airline industry, sent the PBGC from a $7.7 billion surplus to a $3.6 billion deficit in a single year. If you are watching this on a fixed income right now, if you built your retirement around a pension you worked decades to earn, I want you to hear this clearly. What happened to those Montgomery Ward workers is not ancient history. The same financial mechanics are being used today on companies you still depend on. Before I get to that, if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, this is a good time to do it. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. This channel exists specifically to track these stories before they affect your retirement, your savings, and your healthcare. Because what is happening to Walgreens right now connects to everything you just heard. And it matters directly to your family. The 16,000 vendors who were defrauded did not go quietly. In 2002, they filed suit against GE Capital, seeking $500 million. GE Capital pushed hard for a settlement at 20 cents on the dollar. The vendors refused. Eventually, facing a very public trial and very damaging evidence, GE Capital settled for $50 million on $400 million in claims, 12 cents on the dollar. They walked away, having already extracted the full value of the Christmas merchandise sale and paying $50 million to make the lawsuit disappear. Around the same time, the Federal Trade Commission was investigating GE Capital for pressuring bankrupt consumers to sign debt agreements they claimed were legally required when they were not. That case settled for $60 million. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau later ordered GE Capital Retail Bank to pay $225 million for deceptive credit card practices. Montgomery Ward was not a mistake. It was a business model. Now, if you watched our recent video on Sears, you already know what Sycamore Partners is doing to Walgreens real estate. But there is a second part of that story I did not cover there, and when I found it, I realized it maps to Montgomery Ward in a way that is almost too precise to be coincidence. This one is about the workers and the timing. In case you missed the Sears video, here is a quick recap. In August 2025, Sycamore Partners completed a $10 billion acquisition of Walgreens. The same Walgreens on the corner of your neighborhood. The one where you pick up your prescriptions. The one that helped you through the pandemic. They immediately installed a new CEO whose previous job was running Staples under Sycamore's ownership, where he closed roughly 1/3 of all stores and eliminated tens of thousands of jobs, while Sycamore loaded Staples with new debt to pay themselves a $1 billion dividend. That appointment told you everything about what was coming. In October 2025, just weeks after the buyout closed, Walgreens told its 200,000 frontline workers that paid holidays were being eliminated. No more guaranteed pay for Thanksgiving. No more Christmas pay. No Memorial Day or Labor Day pay unless you were physically clocked in that day. For pharmacy technicians and store clerks already stretched thin by inflation, that was not a policy update. That was hundreds of dollars taken directly out of their annual income. And it happened in October, right before the holiday season. The same move, different company, different decade, identical playbook. By February 2026, the layoffs came. Over 600 jobs cut in Illinois and Texas. The Houston Distribution Center, 500,000 square feet, shut down entirely. 9,000 Walgreens employees lost their jobs in 5 months. 500 stores closed. And Sycamore has begun separating Walgreens into 5 standalone entities, with analysts expecting a real estate split that would force the pharmacy to rent back its own former locations, saddling it with debt it was never designed to carry. The same structure that killed Sears, the same structure that killed Red Lobster, now pointed directly at the pharmacy chain 65 million Americans use every single month. Montgomery Ward invented the mechanics of Amazon over a century ago. They built the fulfillment centers, the logistics networks, the direct-to-consumer model, and the satisfaction guarantee that every modern retailer has copied in some form. And then they threw it all away. First, through the stubborn paranoia of one executive who hoarded cash while Sears built an empire. Then, through the calculated strip job of a financial partner who took the profitable parts, lied to the vendors, waited for Christmas, and walked away. The name on the building changes. The playbook does not. Sears, Red Lobster, Montgomery Ward, Walgreens. Different decades and different industries, but walk through the financial records of every single one, and you find the same calculated sequence waiting for you at the end. Most people still believe these companies just could not keep up with the times. That is exactly what the people running this playbook are counting on. If this story made you angry, that anger is pointing at exactly the right thing. You have the framework now. The next time you hear that a beloved brand has been acquired by a private equity firm, that is your warning. Not maybe, not possibly. The countdown has started. If you want to stay ahead of these stories as they unfold, make sure you are subscribed and have the notification bell on so you do not miss the next one. And tell me in the comments below, did you ever shop at Montgomery Ward? Did your family order from the catalog? For a lot of people watching this, that dream book on the kitchen table was the closest thing to Amazon they ever saw. Some of you probably grew up in homes that came out of that catalog. Drop your memory below. I read every single one, and those stories matter. This is EconoNova. Stay sharp.